So welcome everyone. My name is Tony Cockmo, president of the DFW BIM Infrastructure Group. And today we have a special guest, David Butts and Chris Lewis. So I want to thank both of y'all for coming in and doing a presentation for our user group. And so I'll let y'all take it away, talk about reality capture.
Yeah, great. Thanks. And thanks, Tony, for having us.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of background. My name is David Butts. I'm the engineering technology manager for Gannett Fleming, based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, but I work down here at sunny Holden Beach, North Carolina. Been in the industry for 36 years, been a part of the Autodesk Expert Elite program for 7 years now, and participate in all kinds of activities for Autodesk University and different events that go on all the time in regards to Autodesk. I want to introduce my nephew, Chris Lewis, who is on the phone with us today, and he is in sunny Louisiana, working his tail off down there. So, Chris, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
How y'all doing? I'm Chris Lewis, founder of Spotter Industries, a drone technology company based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. I got my start in the drone industry back in the Marine Corps in 2011 when I flew my first drone. And last year, during COVID, I jumped into the commercial side and went out to California to do fire mitigation. I've done cell tower reality capture in the Midwest, some hurricane response work in Florida, and now I'm down in New Orleans doing response work down here.
Cool.
Awesome. So I want to give us a little bit of a history here because this past year has been a really challenging year for a lot of people. These are the last 2 years. You know, everybody went through 2020 and, you know, it's like, what's next? And we get 2021 and, you know, it's like had this a never ending thing now with COVID and all these different things evolving and changing in our industries. And, but my family has been involved in engineering for decades. My cousin Chris is a peanut researcher out of Georgia. Is one of the top peanut guys in the state. My uncle Tony, he was an electrical engineer that worked for the Navy, and so we've always had an engagement from the industry, from the family on the engineering and science and technology and math type career paths. And it's been kind of interesting watching all this stuff evolve and change over the last several years here. You know, I'm an old school guy, and I'm one of these guys that actually started off out in the field, you know, using these really sophisticated tools, right? If I want to look at something closer, I peek in. You get the idea. I mean, the stuff I'm using is really archaic and out of date. And so what's happened over the last year, we're starting to see an approach that's altering. It started before COVID, but it really started changing how we started harvesting information in real time. And, you know, if you guys have heard about it, how many people have heard about digital twins, right?
Yep.
You know, Tony, I mean, you think about this. When did you first start hearing about digital twins?
I heard about it maybe just a few years ago, but I haven't played with it, but I've heard about maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So that's what I think. So
here's the great secret. Digital twins have been around for 40 years.
4 years?
40.
40.
So,
Oh God.
No.
Well, but you have to think about it. I mean, when we got off the board, right? The old school days of ink and Mylar and getting out of drafting and started doing CAD, that was really the infancy of digital twins, because what were we doing back then? We're working on creating, an electronic representation of what we were designing and what we were building.
Yeah.
But now, as we start to look at how people are interacting with each other in these structures and facilities, you know, and you worry about things like social distancing, you know, how do I get from point A to point B? All these things that we never really thought about that much in the traditional design world are now mission critical. And you look at the impact it's had on cities like New York and Philadelphia and Los Angeles, and the real estate, you know, how do we get into those offices and how do we deal with all that? What do we have, you know?
Yeah.
How do we know? So it's really changed. So what I wanted to do, and I wanted to talk a little bit about what Chris is doing. And I also wanted to give you a little bit of family history beyond that too, just besides my uncles and cousins. What was it? Katrina? When was Katrina?
2005.
2005?
Yeah.
So we get a call from Terry's sister, you know, Chris's mom, saying, hey, we're going to come up to Fuquay and hang out with you guys for a couple of days. So they loaded the kids in the van and drove up to Fuquay, and Chris and his brother Don stayed with us, and Mike and Michelle and Kurt stayed with Terry's mom. And that wound up being a 3-month stay.
Mm-hmm.
And the really interesting part is that was when I really got to know Chris. You know, I got to sit back and you know, you have these interactions with him in the family, but not until you really live with somebody, you get to know them. And I was always impressed how motivated he was, just to get in and get in that right environment to really learn and really, really wanting to know more about how he did things, right? And so I'm going to let him talk a little bit about his military career, but he enlisted in the Marines, did a couple of tours in Afghanistan, right?
One tour in Afghanistan.
One tour in Afghanistan. And then came back and had a lot of great stories about what it was like to be an MRAP driver over there. And at this point, he was trying to decide what he wanted to do with his career. We were talking about special forces. We were talking about all this other stuff. And I was really encouraging to go ahead and go back to school and get finished with his degree, which he just did. Congratulations. And then he popped up one day and said, "Hey, I'm going out to California to work with these guys to learn how to do drones, learn how to do drone pilot." And I'm sitting there going, "You're in an ideal position right now." And why is that? Because that whole industry and where it is right now, I want to say it's still in its infancy for what its potential could be. I mean, we're thinking right now that the market itself, just from organic Fleming perspective, we're still trying to make decisions about, is this something that we want to do in-house? Are we going to contract these services out? How are we going to address virtual reality and reality capture? And how's this all going to work out? And so Chris was at the right place at the right time to get involved in this business. And to me, it's also showing, it's a reflection of what's changing in the industry. I mean, think about this. And Tony, you can answer this question too. Where do you think it's more important for us to be focusing training and learning and education? Is it going to be on the engineering side, or is it going to be on the technical specialist side?
Repeat that. Sorry.
Where do you think we need to be focusing our efforts in bringing the industry up and training and education? We already have great engineering programs. What are we missing as an industry? Is it the technical specialist? There's so many potential careers opening up. Where do you see that going? I mean, think about that for a second.
That is a good question.
I'm gonna stump him because it's
yeah.
I'm stumping Tony. That never happens.
I mean, man, I think you might get different answers from everybody here on this. To me, the biggest problem I face is training the clients accessing the data. So when I try to share something with my client, and they're not very tech savvy, there's a huge issue there. And yeah.
I see a bunch of people I know online, and we do a lot of water and wastewater treatment plants. We had a conversation the other day saying, my clients are not sophisticated enough to deal with reality capture. And I beg to differ. I really do, because you start to get into some of these plants. Like, you remember the fire at Notre Dame, right? We had all these issues, and how did we capture what was going on with the cathedral? It was with drones, right?
Yeah.
People were going out and able to capture the structure in the building and get it mapped in such a way that you never could have put a person on a ladder or you have somebody dangling from a helicopter, right? That's not what we were going to do. It's not safe. It's not productive. And so to me, what I'm seeing is an evolution in the industry towards that technical specialty. Okay. And while the roles of the engineer and the architect are still important, the roles of what Chris and other companies are doing now to take on something like reality capture, I think, is the next evolution of what we're doing in design, right? And the better way to harvest this technology to capture things that we were doing manually for years, right? So the big thing that caught me with Chris, and I'm gonna hand this over to him because I'm talked enough, is Chris came to me and he said, "Hey, we're working on developing the software that allows us to communicate with NASA and with the FAA on how we map our flights for our drones." And I'm sitting here thinking, this is brilliant, because it's that niche that you find a need for that makes that technical specialist so important. No matter what the role is, whether it's computational fluid dynamics, whether it's business analytics, whether it's doing this kind of stuff, it's that niche of finding where that needs to be. I want to hand it off to Chris and let him talk a little bit about Spotter Industries and his company and what these guys do. Okay. Chris, all you, baby.
Solid. So my entry to the drone industry, like I was saying, was in the military. We used drones initially for surveillance, doing orbits around a convoy to make sure there aren't any bad guys coming in. So using FLIR and things like that. When I jumped into the commercial side, that's exactly what we're doing. The department on which we were talking about earlier is providing those deliverables to the client. It's all about when you can use drone technology to collect the data in the right way, you provide these consumable deliverables that allows a client to be able to comprehend their project way more easily than they could have before. So it takes all the technical aspects of the engineering world and all the difficult hurdles that have to be passed, like we were talking about before, and really brings it down to and simplifies it by using drone technology to map things out and have this 3D digital twin or reality capture model that people can really easily see. So that's what I've been doing over the past year. So cell towers, doing digital twins, data collection for the power companies in California. And now I basically canvass the entire industry across the entire country to figure out where we are and how we are collecting this data, and then where we're going with drone technology in the future. Yeah. So that brought me to just diving into the studies, really diving into a lot of FAA paperwork, because that's the most difficult part. Going through the regulations and seeing why the industry isn't progressing faster, or what is stopping it or preventing it from moving to what this Jetsons era that we're looking towards. Yeah. So I dove really deep into the regulatory stuff. Dove really deep into NASA's plans for the next 20 years. And that's when I came back and began Spotter Industries to develop the software to provide access to NASA's Unmanned Traffic Management System, or UTM. Mm-hmm. The UTM is a digital highway in the sky that's basically already there. I've talked to some of the NASA researchers out of Ames Research Laboratory out of San Francisco, and they say it's there, it's ready to be used, waiting for FAA regulation to allow access to it for drones. So we're right on that cusp of being able to access this massive digital highway in the sky that will allow for autonomous, beyond visual line of sight operation of drones across the entire country. And this technology is starting here, but it's scheduled to go international very soon. So it's a technology that can expand very quickly and provide a whole different aspect for the industry. Rather than manually piloting drones within line of sight and needing a visual observer to sit there and make sure you're not hitting anything, you have the ability to have autonomous flight over long distances. So that's what we're working on now. And I think we could go into the video or show that off.
Yeah, if you want to share a video.
I'm digging the Jetsons reference, man. I love it.
Yeah.
He's tying back to my generation.
The Jetsons.
I'm digging it in a big kind of way, man. I love it.
Yeah, get this thing going right.
Don't forget to turn your screen now. We had to work on this earlier.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry.
You don't want to stop broadcasting right now. Let's get him back where he needs.
Yeah, it's still recording.
Yeah, so
that working right?
Okay. Yeah, now we're going.
There we go.
There we go.
Awesome.
Check it out.
Welcome to Spotter. Spotter Industries is a veteran-owned and operated drone technology company based in Raleigh, North Carolina. We provide drone services through aerial infrastructure inspections, developing drone industry-specific software, and manufacturing next-generation drones to compete and surpass the current industry. The American drone industry is growing at a rapid pace, with the number of recreational professional drone operators projected to double by 2025. New use cases for drones, from aerial inspections to drone delivery and beyond, are entering the market every day. This increase in unmanned aerial traffic has led NASA to develop the Unmanned Traffic Management System, or UTM, an aerial digital highway designed to coordinate the skies and air traffic within. Our passion for progress has led us to develop software that provides access to NASA's Unmanned Traffic Management System. The UTM is an aerial digital highway created by NASA that is designed to safely control the traffic of unmanned aerial vehicles beyond the pilot's visual line of sight. This innovative development will launch the drone industry into its next stage of evolution, allowing more use cases to be discovered, developed, and commercialized in the very near future. Spotter's primary function is to provide access to the UTM through using several UAS industry-specific functions within its software, including flight automation to enable our customers to perform delivery and mapping operations via drone. Spotter software will provide provide access to the UTM by creating an integrative environment for FAA regulatory compliance on web-based, iOS, and Android platforms. All of our users will always take flight knowing that they are within FAA compliance, and the FAA will know when, where, why, and how each of our customers are entering airspace. Join us on our journey into the future by funding our venture. This video is intended for the NC IDEA Fund's Seed Grant Program in order to further develop our airspace regulatory automation software for the drone industry.
All right.
Really cool.
So,
Cool.
so yeah, and that's the thing I can't say, I got to stop saying digging this because it makes me dated. But if you think about this, where were we with all this technology just a short span ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and the fact that we have to take into consideration now, because there's so much traffic and so many things with autonomous vehicles coming in line, the ability for us as a country to be able to address this and be able to deal with it to make sure that it's safe and reliable. I mean, that's the kind of technology advancement that we really need to be looking for.
Yeah.
And so just kudos. I think it was a great business idea. Great
Yeah.
plan.
While I was watching that video, a video popped into my head, talking about drones that I saw on LinkedIn where they were testing drones to send out where fires were. And then the phone immediately, the drone would go straight to the fire and dump something, over the fire, So I just visualized that immediately. It was like, man, for emergency vehicles and stuff like that, you send out these drones automatically and they're just flying straight there based on GPS and all that stuff. So,
And what's impressive is that North Carolina has the first concept of operations for public safety agencies to use the UTM for that priority access you're talking about.
yeah.
So we have a plan in place to allow fire to cut a lane through the UTM in order for all the other delivery drones, especially of that nature, and the say a fire drone, like you're saying, could cut through the UTM on a UAS volume restriction.
Yeah.
And go straight to the scene of the accident.
Even people that are, stranded at homes during these hurricanes, you're sending these drones out to deliver supplies, so straight to their homes. They're, I remember the images of people stranded on top of their roofs during Katrina, it was hard to get access, kind of get to them with boats, but we only had so many boats, so drones would come in handy, dropping off, life jackets or something like that and supplies. So
Search and rescue is huge for drones, and that's why I came down to help with Hurricane Ida. I've been not only delivering packages and goods and tarps and food and water and gas and things of that nature, but I've also used drones to identify damage, locate lost things, people. For Houma and La Place especially, it's really rough over there, and I've been on the North Shore helping with identifying damage to structures with trees being down over there. There's a lot of tall pines there, so things are kind of scattered. And across the city, I've been identifying different locations that are especially in Metairie. Metairie is kind of pieces right now. Narrow corridors of damage and a lot of power lines down and things of that nature. Huge use case for drones.
And talk about inspections, there's a lot of infrastructure that's going old in, especially for bridges, and now doing the drones for inspections on these bridges, underneath the bridges where it's really hard and difficult to get underneath to do these inspections. So I can see it take advantage of those drones and flying underneath these bridges to do the inspections and stuff. So
absolutely. And North Carolina was the first state in the United States, the US to get the bridge waiver. So last October, they did a waiver to allow drones to inspect bridges. And now they've been using everything from Skydio to other LiDAR, using drones to map the bridges out, and they can get in and around the entire structure.
Yeah.
Very useful use case for drones. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Let's check online, see if anybody has any comments and questions. If anybody has any questions about the video or the topic we're talking about here, go ahead and post on the chat. Let's see here. Trying to see if anybody's posted any questions.
Oh, with Matt right there. Yeah, the only thing that's in the way of BV laws is the FAA, and that's why we're here.
And I guess I can ask questions to the attendees. Is anybody taking advantage of reality capture and drones in their projects right now? I know one of my clients is a survey company, and they're doing a lot of drone surveying and reality capture and stuff like that.
It's awesome. Yeah, that's where the industry is now, is providing those services of getting trained drone pilots out to do the reality capture, collect data, and provide those deliverables like we were talking about. The next phase is our software that we're developing, and soon after that, manufacturing, we're working on for the next generation of the drone industry.
Yeah, so let's see, we've got some questions. David, can you see the chat too?
I got it. Let's talk a couple questions. And this is from my cousin Chris out of Georgia. I'm glad he's here. So, what are the payloads of some of these UAVs? Thinking of the emergency response examples you were talking about, give us some examples. What kind of payload can you guys do?
Okay. Anything as simple as food and water. There are delivery companies coming up now that are delivering everything from Starbucks to Japanese food and things of that nature. But when it comes to like the fires out in California, there are now these drones that have these canisters on the bottom that deliver these basically little paintballs. And when the paintballs fall into the fire, they explode with these extinguishing repellent to put the fires out. So it's it's easier to target and fly those things over rather than manned aircraft.
Cheaper than flying a massive plane in there with scooping water out of the lake. So cool. Interesting. Here's another question from Josh Settle in Raleigh. This may not be covered in the presentation, but can you cover drone scan deliverables? How have you dealt with the accuracy of the scan versus efficiently viewing and scaling deliverables with billions of points of data?
Absolutely.
Especially with the design software like Rhino, AutoCAD, Revit. It's always a challenge to work with this kind of data. Mm-hmm. So how do you guys handle that in terms of what you're doing at the drone level? I mean, what do you do there?
From my personal experience, is all down to the pilot. The pilot needs to understand the data that the pilot needs to collect with the drone they're using, how to collect that data, and the exact deliverable that needs to be presented. So it's very important to have highly trained drone pilots that know how to operate this equipment efficiently and know the deliverables that need to be sent to the client. When it comes to cell tower 3D rendering, the digital twin creation, like we were talking about before, it's progressed rapidly, even over the past 4 to 6 months that I've even had experience with that type of work. In the beginning, we're doing autonomous orbits around the tower, doing time shots, just taking the pictures, and then putting them into software to stitch them all together. Now there's software where you can press a button on your iPad or tablet. The drone scans the entire tower, and then you press another button to tell it to go, and it does the entire scan on its own. And it comes back with a deliverable that's a fully 3D rendered digital twin. So the accuracy is getting better and better. So what has been so far has been pilot accuracy, knowing exactly where to hit each data collection point. And now it's getting more towards autonomy and using machine learning to get all the small intricacies of whatever you're collecting.
Mm-hmm. So, and I'll answer Chris on this other question in terms of pounds. It really kind of depends on the drone model that you're using. I know that some of the smaller drones you're good for a couple of pounds or something like that, but some of the bigger models are starting to get a lot more capacity to them. Mm-hmm. We don't really address that size in what we do with our industry for scanning, because it's really about the acquired data from the scan itself. And so that's more what we're using the drone for. But as far as delivery services, I wouldn't be surprised to start seeing more brands of drones going out to handle things, mm-hmm. like even within the industry of being able to fertilize a field, not just putting out a fire, but how do you address crop care and that type of cycling? Those are things that I think that the drone industry is really going to be able to take advantage of as they get.
I'll throw a question in there. So is there a particular drone type that you're currently using, or is there multiple types of drones? Is there a specific brand?
For now, it's been almost completely DJI products.
Okay.
They've been the industry standard for a while. They own 76% of the industry, and they have for a few years now. And now American drone companies are coming up. Skydio is one of the favorites. They're the ones that are allowed for the autonomy for the bridge inspections that happen in North Carolina, because they have LiDAR sensors all around the drone to prevent it from running into anything, and it can also collect that data while it's flying and operating on whatever you're scanning. It's a huge boost for American drones is Skydio's ability to have that autonomous flight and data collection at the same time. So right now, DJI is what we're using. It's really easy. It's
Yeah.
really easy to train somebody up on how to use it and operate it. And whenever you need them to collect the data, you have all these incredible sensors on there, interchangeable sensors on some of the larger models like the Inspire 2. And that just makes it simpler to operate. So it's been DJI for a while now.
Okay, cool. Does anybody else have any questions? Let's see. Okay. So right now, if I remember right, you're waiting for some of the regulations to get approved. Is that correct?
Yes.
Continue progressing. I mean, what's y'all's timeline? What do you predict to get this approval and moving to the next step?
So we're going through the FAA approval process over this next year, right?
Okay.
So we have several hurdles in place that we have to go through, and it's developing the software and passing their test. And the software has to pass all of the regulations before we can move into the next phase, which is why we're doing services now and working on the software as well.
Okay.
Once it's approved, then it's ready to roll.
Okay. Cool. All right. Do you want to show your one of you? I want to share your company website, where people can go to your website.
I'll post it in the.
Or you can post a link on the chat if you want to.
Yeah, and Chris, one question did come up. Can you talk a little bit about insurance and risk? You know, are there any concerns that you have to deal with on this?
Drone insurance is a huge need. So I have insurance from a buddy of mine. He has his own insurance company. And he settled everything like that. Are you talking about using drones for insurance claims or drone insurance for drone equipment?
Probably drone insurance and risk of using the drones. That would be a question I'm asking is, you know, what are the other costs that we're going to have to deal with as we get into this industry with the considerations, things that you have to worry about, like falling on people. Yeah. Christian brought that up when we were showing the part of the video where it's crossing over the bridge, and he's like, "Oh, you can't do that. That's a violation of FAA rules." And it's kind of like, no exception, but that's why they had that rule in place, was to keep it from actually falling on people.
And just in April, the update to the rules with the Part 61 waiver, so you can fly at night and over people. And that's very news just now in April.
Yeah.
The insurance cost depends on how many drones you're operating, how you're operating them. It's every single factor that your business does as a service falls into that insurance cost. They want to know about it. They want to know if you're flying drones at 100 miles an hour chasing cars to do videos, if you're flying over a volcano. So you might lose a drone or 2 drones a day. So they want to know actually what you're doing, how you're operating. And the training is also a huge part. They take into account the amount of hours each pilot has. Yeah. So that's a thunderstorm out here. I don't know if you guys can hear that. But
that was a thunderstorm?
Oh, yeah. We're thinking it was a heavy breather, man. It was like, okay.
I just cracked open.
Ed was breathing into the microphone. We couldn't help it. You know, it's like.
Yeah. But I have a friend who does, he's a consultant company that provides drone services, but he was telling me just years ago, I didn't even know that, when you're flying drones, if you're within 1 mile of an airport, you need to go to the airport, get all the paperwork and stuff like that. So, and we were within like 0.9 or something from the airport, down at DFW airport. So,
well, they don't like you down.
So it all depends, and that's where a lot of the software we're working on falls into place, because that initial hurdle that's in place from the FAA is doing the airspace clearance software.
Okay.
So low altitude authorization notification capability, LANC.
Yeah.
We're approved for that. That's exactly what you're talking about, flying in controlled airspace. That's the initial regulatory hurdle we have to pass. Now, there are ways to get access to controlled airspace, but right now they're nowhere near where they need to be.
Yeah.
I've done it all the time. You get LANC clearance to fly in a controlled airspace. The manned aircraft still don't know where you are. So you have this LANC approval, but you have this little grid outside in controlled airspace, but there's not that communication that is needed for this to be a safe transition for manned and unmanned aircraft to be in the same airspace.
Yeah.
So we're on with the software.
Yeah. Richard was asking 5 miles, right?
It might be different in every city. I don't know.
It is different. Well, and that's part of the problem with the industry right now. Each state has its own regulations
Yeah.
that supersede what the FAA may require. You know,
Yeah.
they're gonna, and then you get into the engagement with military bases. You know, restricted airspace. There's so many different variables that can
Yep.
come into play. You know,
And then
we deal with that with our drone activities. You know,
Yep.
it's like,
And then probably the flight elevation height too comes into play. So, you know, how high can you fly your drone based on the region you're at? So,
definitely. So the traditional is 0 to 400 feet, unless you're inspecting something that's taller. So we did some radio towers, digital twin rendering in Virginia, and the tower was 640 feet. So we had to go 200 feet above that to render the entire tower. Now you have to get that clearance beforehand, which is another LANCE clearance. But that's the one stipulation. If you're inspecting something higher than 400 feet, then you can go above it. But generally, it's 0 to 400 feet for all unmanned aircraft at this time, small UAS. 0.55 to 55 pounds.
okay.
Exactly.
so I wanted to kind of talk about what happens after the drone. You know, and we had this conversation come up recently where, you know, we're starting to harvest all this data, and there's two problems with the industry. One is the client expectation, right? Are we setting the right expectations about what it is that we're delivering to the client to make sure that they understand what they're receiving? Because I think there's a misconception in the industry that all I'm doing is hitting the easy button and I get this 3D model of whatever it is that I've scanned. And I've learned from experience, especially with a lot of scan to BIM projects that we have right now, that that's usually rarely the case. I mean, we get videos all the time from ground capture where somebody's standing in front of the camera, right, as it's scanning. We get those kind of mistakes. And so the output now is becoming something that's really important. And this is where, again, at Fleming as a company, we're looking at, okay, we've got this. How do we get it out to the vendor so that it's something that's simple to understand? And I wanted to share my screen real quick because we got about probably another 10, 15 minutes before we need to break this thing off here. But let me share my screen real quick and talk to you about what we're doing to actually impact the industry here. Let's get this guy to share real fast. And so augmented reality is a big push for us right now. Not just virtual reality, but augmented reality. I don't know how many of you guys know the actual difference between this. But virtual reality is basically where you're wearing the goggles, you're immersed in a scene, and you're a part of that scene. And augmented reality is where you take something like a tablet or a phone or some kind of device where you're augmenting what the reality is. You can actually see beyond what's in there. And so we actually started developing a couple of tools in-house. The first one is the GF Underground Utility Viewer here, where somebody can take a tablet or a phone and walk up to a site, and our app actually cuts a hole into the surface and shows the rendered vision of what's underneath that surface. And so we're working with a couple of our technology partners to actually come up with this, to actually help that owner understand that when you walked up to this road where there's a pipe leak, right? And we've seen that happen, or a flood, or a culvert that's collapsing, and what all is involved and engaged around this, right? And so this augmented reality, based on an accumulation of the scan data, the design models, whatever we have available to us as a resource, we can actually take a look at that. And this is something that we're actively developing right now and trying to get out to market within our own industry on the engineering side. We also use a lot of products like InfoWorks. I don't know how many of you guys, Tony, I know you know InfoWorks like the back of your hand.
Yep.
But, you know, this to me is like, this is where we're going and already adding going to, is the ability to take our site models and use GIS data to harvest this information in and superimpose things like pipe networks underneath the city streets so that the city has a better understanding of what they're doing before they start cutting holes in the pavement, right? And then going the next step beyond that with our photogrammetry viewer, this is where we're actually doing holographic type images to bring in a site and place it somewhere, kind of similar to what we used to do with the old cardboard models, right? Remember those back in the day? That's how I addressed it. Go back to my cardboard again. Here,
Yep.
build a tower, right?
Yeah.
It's that kind of stuff that we're actually saying now we want to be able to superimpose this with whatever media we have, a phone, a tablet, whatever, to see what we're actually designing in context.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that gets lost on a lot of people is that they think that there's an easy button that does all this, but it's really, we're at that cutting edge of the technology now that is really going to start rolling things over into the industry and and have a bigger impact, especially in Chris's generation. Maybe not as much in mine, because I'm going to retire in 5 or 6 or 8 years or 70 years, as to say. But this is really where the technology is going. It's what's going to evolve and affect our design moving forward. And so I think you're going to see a lot more of this. And that's why I brought up the thing at the start of the conversation about the role of the technical specialist and how important it's going to be moving forward. And how do we get that career path modeled and set up for the industry so that we can look beyond our traditional way of thinking, right? Because you get a lot of people, and we have people at our company, man, we're guilty of. We got people that say, well, my client just wants AutoCAD, right? They don't want this stuff. They're not sophisticated enough, and I don't buy that crap. To me, that's garbage. I think you're underselling yourself and the industry as a whole when you don't think that something like this could not be beneficial. But tell me what you think about that. I mean, are we there? Are we getting there? And how does all this come together as a package?
I think we're there. We're moving forward. I think, to me, what I've seen is that the bigger clients are moving forward. They're going to be using to take advantage of the developers, technology. It's the smaller developers, smaller contractors. I've already seen big contractors take advantage of that technology, but it's the smaller contractors that are just now getting in the industry. It's only been around for a few years. They're doing simple, hey, just give me a DWG file, give me a PDF, I'm fine. And I'm going to use ag tech to do the construction, the cost estimating, and that's it. They're not plugging this stuff if they're doing a road, not throwing the actual data into the machine cutter and letting the machine cut it. It's the big companies, yeah, they're doing it. The big developers, they're doing it. They're taking full advantage of it. But what I'm seeing on my end is the small developers are probably lacking that experience in it. So. But I think we're getting there. So, David, if you remember, about 6 years ago when Vegas started taking all that as-built into InfoWorks and doing all your utilities, and they did a big presentation about that. That had been a huge project task to take the whole city utilities master plans, and some of the stuff could have been just straight up old scanned PDFs, and they're now converting it and putting it into InfoWorks. I'm sure they had probably to do it into Civil 3D first and then straight to InfoWorks. But I think every city should have something like that. I do a lot of projects where they don't have any as-built. They don't have any. Here's a scanned PDF. I'm trying, and they're like, hey, some cities I've actually worked with, they don't have any as-built. I'm like, okay, how do I find this water line? Well, you can call dig test and go find it. And it's like, how do you not have a set of plans or DWG or anything, so it's amazing, some of these smaller cities. So
it's in Bob's head. I have a client like that.
Yep,
you got that exactly. Tech that's been there for 50 years. He's older than I am, right?
Public Works director that's been here for 50 years. He knows exactly where that water line is.
Where everything is, and when he retires, all that knowledge goes with it. Right?
Yep. Yeah. So look at City of Dallas. We are still old school. If you want drainage and storage system and stuff like that, you got to go down to the vault and scan it yourself. You have to go down to the City of Dallas and scan those plans. So I'm actually probably going to submit a contract and say, I'm going to go in there and scan all that stuff and convert it for you. This is ridiculous. It's not that hard. So I'll convert all those storm pipes into, GIS shape files or whatever format you want. So,
yeah. And Chris brought up the question here, these products interface with geospatial. Absolutely. They do. I mean, we use Esri. We own a company called GeoDecisions. That's an Esri Platinum partner, right? And so we do a ton of work with ArcGIS. And I think what you're starting to see now is that symmetry between the two systems. It used to be the GIS and BIM competed with each other, right? Remember that day? It's all about the technology. It's who's going to take place. Is it GIS or is it BIM? And it becomes project information modeling, where it's the acceptance of both of these technologies into a single tool, a single resource in here. And so I think we're getting there. We're getting there a lot faster than I thought we would at this point.
Yep.
We're starting to see more of that. And so it's like with InfoWorks, you're pulling up GIS data, right? So when I think about these smaller companies and these smaller municipalities that have their water treatment plants and their pump stations, it's not that we can't acquire that data. Again, it's awareness. It's working with your clients to understand that there is this virtual representation of what we do and the importance of having this as a system within the country or worldwide or whatever, gives us a more holistic idea of what we have in terms of resources, assets, and everything else that we use to manage water, to manage power, to control, catastrophes, to deal with those types of things. I think that's the thing that we have to stay in mind is we got to keep that big picture in focus, no matter how small the client is.
Yeah.
Help them.
Yep.
We got responsibilities in the industry. We can't be waiting on the government to do this. We have responsibilities in industry to educate our clients.
Yep.
Make sure they understand what they're doing. And so this is just some of the tools that we're doing. And that's all it is. It's just a tool, guys.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Matt had a good question. I don't know if you saw Matt's question. The use of GCP and RTK, tighten up the point clouds.
So it depends on the data set you're collecting when it comes to using drones and GCPs. I've used them for cell tower rendering, but now some of the software is bypassing the need for that. It just really depends on the level of software you're using. Pix4D is amazing. Now, if you're using Drone Deploy, it's like a cloud-based software rather than hardline software. So you use GCPs and they can do the measurements and data rendering more easily through by using GCPs. While using Pix4D, the autonomous renderings makes it way easier without you not even needing to use it. So it just depends on the data set you're collecting. I've used GCPs and I haven't. Just really depends on the client.
We got another question in here from Matt, or from Josh. I'm sorry.
Josh,
talks about the live signal software may interface with drones. Work kind of like an interference system with other objects in the sky that can override flight plans. Send the drone to a safe haven or back to the origin of start until it can safely proceed, or hold it like a communal charging station, like the gas stations of the sky. Right.
Yep.
That'd be cool. And do you I'm gonna skip ahead here. Do you all brainstorm about building for future tech uses in the software so you don't need to start over from scratch? We are doing that now.
Absolutely.
I think as an industry, I'm gonna call out Autodesk again as the example in here. My relationship with Autodesk is 180 degrees different than it was when I was a reseller. It is completely different beast now. I have a better relationship with them and other software vendors now than I ever had when I was selling products, because there was this fear in my culture, in my generation, of loss of intellectual property, right? That was our competitive advantage, was to own this piece, this segment of what we did in the industry. And I think what you're seeing is a change in the industry as a whole to more of a communal thinking, in the sense that, we need to learn how to build off of each other. There's still those niches, like what he's talking about with the software development, right? There's still those niches where you can develop something and create a product that is your IP, that's very smart, that's a complement or a supplement to the situation. But I think a lot of this, you are kind of building from scratch, but we're really not. We're taking existing tools that we already have and learning how to extend them into this built environment. How do you extend them into the real world? We have a lot of resources. Think about 25, 35 years of CAD, right? It's not like we don't have electronic resources. Come on. I mean, it's a really small minority that don't have that kind of digital technology.
Yeah.
How do we take and aggregate all of it so that it makes sense, right?
Yeah. Do you see in the future possibly where everybody's sharing their reality capture into some platform where you can now download those models, download that data, open to the public? All these engineering companies are now sharing their data and say, hey, we got something right next to your development. Can we, they can go to a certain platform and share, capture all that information. Do you see that in the future where engineering companies are willing to share all their data? Now you got to,
Yes and no. I see a lot of willingness to share the built environment, right?
Yeah.
3D model, that kind of stuff, because it's a given now. What I don't see becoming something that's widespread is data, because data is money for everything right now, right?
Can you repeat that? Sorry, I couldn't hear it.
That is where the money is right now.
Mm-hmm.
We had another conversation last week in a planning session with our strategic action plan about, where is it that the industry is going to become critical? And it's the information about what goes into the equipment in a water treatment plant, right?
Mm-hmm.
When did this thing get placed in the service? Who did I purchase it from? What's the maintenance record? That's all asset information that you're coming from, that you're going to assign to these digital recreations, digital twins of what we have, that we've scanned, that we've built as a model, however we've done it. And I think the smarter move is to keep that data closely guarded just for cybersecurity reasons and that kind of stuff. Because again, it's like spilling your candy in the lobby. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you're keeping critical information secure, but at the same time, situational awareness of where you are, what's physically there, I see that becoming very common, very easy to access. And now that we've got the technology like what Chris is doing to harvest this information, I think you're really going to see an evolution over this next generation of users.
Yeah.
That don't have those same preconceived notions that I had from 20 years ago about my IP, right? I want to protect my 3D model, my precious. We don't want to do that. Right? We want to make sure that what we're doing is easy to share, accessible for all users.
Yeah.
Whatever it needs to be used.
We actually, there is a city here in the DFW area, which I love what they did is when we went to their GIS website. When you do as-built, you submit all the shake data for all utilities and infrastructure. You can go onto the GIS website and see all the utilities and all the data on the pipe within that website, and then click on it and see all the plans. And then you have to set up an account with the city. And I said, oh my goodness, this is amazing. Then you can download all the data and the whole set of plans. I'm like, why can't this city do, all the cities do this, providing, I know there's security risks, like you just mentioned, but it just saved so much time for me to just go in that website, download all the utility files, download all the plans related to the adjacent development or the development in front of me, like the roads and highways. Man, it was just, I just wish every city did that. I thought it was amazing, because it was all GIS related. They're on surface. No, they're on grid. All the GIS stuff on the cities are on grid. But I just, I don't know about other cities in other states, but, we do have one here that really does like to share all their data.
Yeah, it's cool how it's going to happen. I mean, just again, think about what Chris is harvesting right now.
Yep.
What are we getting?
Yeah.
Full 3D renderings of now city blocks at this point. So
yeah.
I imagine in the near future, rendering full campuses, like NC State's campus or RTP and things of that nature, and mapping out the entire area. One interesting thing I saw was Epic Games right there out of Cary, North Carolina, acquired a augmented reality company and then bought Cary Town Center. And I was like, you could map out that entire location, this millions of square foot building, and have an augmented reality location that people could enter from their homes and have an entire interaction with in this augmented reality realm. So there are a lot of implications of where it's going. And I've never heard the idea of having it all shared in one place, but I think having cities all mapped and 3D rendered and able to be shared amongst companies is a huge thing that could push us forward even faster than we are going now. So
right. And cloud platforms like Forge, that's where